recently, you must have heard the news that 21 Russian drones, while attacking Ukraine, entered Polish territory. Suddenly, Poland closed its airspace and shot down all the drones. We all know that Poland is a NATO country and is also called the first line of defense for NATO. After this, Poland gathered all the NATO countries and discussed the matter, and now NATO's Article 4 has been activated. Under Article 4, when any NATO country feels that its sovereignty and internal territorial integrity are under threat, that country can invoke Article 4. In this, all NATO countries collectively discuss what should be done next and whether Article 5 should be invoked. According to Article 5, an attack on one NATO country is considered an attack on all NATO countries, and once Article 5 is activated, all NATO countries move into action. Article 4 has been activated 8 times so far, and Article 5 has been invoked only once by the United States after 9/11. At that time, all NATO countries came together to take control of Afghanistan, and all NATO countries sent their troops there. Since then, Article 5 has never been invoked. Now, regarding this incident, Trump has said, "The time has come for all NATO countries to impose sanctions on Russia." You can see this news. Trump issues an ultimatum for NATO countries on Russia sanctions. So, will the NATO countries jointly impose sanctions on Russia? Here you can see that since 2022, the European Union has reduced its dependence on Russia, but the European Union is still heavily reliant on Russia. Besides, the European Union depends on Russia for coal, refined petroleum products, iron and steel, aluminum, copper, nickel, fertilizers, industrial chemicals, wood and wood products, some food items, such as fish and seafood, and specialized industrial machinery. And not just the European Union, but the United States also depends on Russia for several goods. However, due to sanctions, the US buys them in limited quantities. The US imports crude oil, refined oil products, coal, nickel, and some rare metals from Russia that are used in aircraft and high-tech industries such as titanium. Besides, precious stones and jewelry, diamonds, and other jewelry materials, as well as natural gas like LNG, are also procured by the US from Russia in limited quantities. So, suddenly imposing sanctions on Russia is very difficult for both the US and the European Union. But ever since Russia's 21 drones infiltrated Poland, all NATO countries are on high alert because if Russia attacks Poland and Poland loses, then other NATO countries will also be at risk. Therefore, no country wants to take any risk here. In such a scenario, it is possible that NATO countries may impose sanctions on Russia because now the matter concerns national security. The UK has already stated that it wants to strengthen Poland's air defense system, and many other countries will also provide Poland with various military equipment. And Trump has urged not only Russia but also G7 and EU countries to impose strict tariffs on India and China. Here you can see, US Treasury calls on G7 EU to impose tariffs on China, India over Russian oil purchases. Chinese media has also published an article on this, which you can see here. US pressures G7 countries to impose strict tariffs on India, China, because they are buying oil from Russia. They have accused the US of using tariffs as a tool to increase its hegemony. And this line, impose strict tariffs on India, China, because they are buying oil from Russia, and the US is using tariffs as a tool to increase its hegemony. These words are not from some journalist, but from the Chinese government. This newspaper is the leading publication of the Chinese Communist Party, and China uses it to comment on international issues. All these statements are from analysts sitting within the Chinese government, and it also states, Chinese experts describe. So you can consider this as an official statement of the Chinese government. So the question is, will NATO or G7 countries impose tariffs on China and India? First of all, suddenly imposing tariffs is not easy for the European Union because the EU has two policies: anti-dumping regulation, EU 2016/1036, and anti-subsidy regulation, EU 2016/1037. Under these, the European Commission ensures whether the imposed tariffs are justified or if they harm the European market and industries. The European Commission conducts a thorough investigation before imposing tariffs, so immediate action is not possible. It is like a proposal that can only be enforced after approval. Thus, imposing tariffs is not that easy for NATO countries, and the same will apply in the case of Russia. And if, hypothetically, the European Union imposes tariffs, then what will happen? If the EU imposes tariffs on China, their domestic production and industries will completely shut down, factories will close, and millions of jobs will be lost at once. The reason is that Europe imports huge quantities of electronics, machinery, and industrial equipment from China, and the whole world knows that no one can replace China when it comes to cheap raw materials. Many European industries depend on Chinese raw materials. Secondly, the supply chain and trade with China is very complex and long, Imposing tariffs will increase inflation and disrupt the supply chain, making consumer products more expensive, as happened in America. Furthermore, among G7 countries, Japan is also heavily dependent on China for raw materials, and both countries have large investments in each other. Many industrial units in Japan depend on China's cheap production capacity and raw materials. Japan imports crucial minerals and rare earth elements from China, necessary for high-tech electronics and defense equipment. However, Japan has also strengthened alternative sources like Southeast Asian countries, India, and the USA. But even then, Japan will not impose tariffs on China. If 2 or 3 countries are not willing, the rest will also refuse to impose tariffs. The US will not impose sanctions on Russia alone because Trump has already stated that America will impose significant restrictions on Russia only when all NATO countries are ready to impose sanctions and stop buying oil from Russia. Trump has already imposed tariffs on India, but they have had little effect on India. Instead, American common people have been affected as grocery items became very expensive. India, however, has reduced taxes and will soon impose zero tax on most grocery items. Talking about India, which is already bearing a 50% US tariff, will NATO or G7 countries impose tariffs on India? In India's case, this is unlikely because 2 major NATO countries, Germany and France, are already close to India. For example, France is in talks over a major deal with India, a deal Trump had wanted, involving India receiving F-35 fighter jets, but India showed no particular interest. Moreover, Germany has already stated its wish to have a close deal with India. And in recent months, India-Germany relations have improved significantly. Japan and India also share good relations. India has signed a major bullet train deal with Japan, and Japan is even providing 2 bullet trains for free. Thus, these countries will definitely not impose tariffs on India. If France and Germany and the EU refuse to impose tariffs or sanctions on India and China, other countries will follow their lead since their policies are almost similar. Therefore, I don't believe Trump's tariffs and sanctions will hit Russia. Also, France is very unstable internally as the government has fallen, so France will not be ready. Imposing tariffs or sanctions is not easy for European Union countries. Now, putting greater pressure on India and China could prove even more dangerous for the US, because if tariffs are imposed on China, China will impose restrictions on rare earth elements as it did previously, and Trump had to remove tariffs then. This time, China might open its entire foreign currency reserves in dollars. If that happens, the dollar could suffer significant damage. Here you can see that China has the largest foreign exchange reserves, which poses a significant threat to the United States, and India-US relations have also deteriorated. Increasing pressure directly means strengthening BRICS. If India gives the green signal, BRICS could soon become strong. After that, the economy will completely shift, new supply chains will be established, and a multipolar world will expand. If you want me to make a detailed video on BRICS and what the world will look like if BRICS stand strong, please comment below. Coming to the Russia-Ukraine war, it will continue like this for many years. Russia will capture the entire land of Ukraine, and it might also attack Poland. Since Russian drones have infiltrated Poland, NATO countries feel Russia might soon attack Poland. These drones were likely sent by Russia to test the capability of Poland's air defense system, as many countries do, including India. Though Russia has said it will not attack Poland, it had made similar claims about Ukraine and later attacked. In summary, no country will impose tariffs on anyone. The Russia-Ukraine war will continue like this for years. Russia will do whatever it wants on the ground level. And fighting Russia is not easy for any country because Russia is a war economy. Russian government companies keep producing weapons from the money earned through oil and gas, so they will never face a shortage of weapons. India will never stop buying oil from Russia because currently, India is repaying its 1971 debt and gets the cheapest oil from Russia, which India sells at a higher price to its own people and other European countries, thus generating good revenue. So India will never stop buying oil from Russia. India has a certain stance regarding America, especially concerning Trump. India neither has a strong friendship nor enmity with Trump. And today, no matter how close India is to China, India's view on China is that any kind of relationship with China holds zero value. This was also noticed in the recent SEO summit. Here you can see in the recently held SEO summit video, Xi Jinping is warmly embracing Putin but only shaking hands with Modi. This indicates that our relations are temporary, and the reason is the border dispute between India and China. That is why they embraced Putin, because there is no border dispute with him. So that's all for today. As soon as any new developments occur, updated videos will be made available for everyone. Thank you very much for watching the video.